Hey, let's get to know Seth Hernandez from people who know him really well. Prospect profile time. Baseball America's Carlos Collazo. Tell us about Seth Hernandez and what we need to know about one of the top prospects here in the sport coming into this draft.
Yeah, what you need to know is Seth Hernandez is the top pitching prospect in the 2025 class. We've got him number 2 overall on the board. I think you can make a pretty easy, pretty compelling case that Hernandez has the most pure upside of any player in this draft class. He has been one of the top just overall prospects in this high school class going back for several years now. He's been a name that scouts have been well aware of. He has only continued to come into his own over the years. He had a great senior season with a loaded Corona High team out in California. And from like what you want to see for a front of the rotation pitching prospect, I think Seth checks all of the boxes. He's got a fastball that is regularly in the mid 90s. He's been up to 100 multiple times. He's got an out pitch changeup that's a 70 grade offering and just devastating to both lefties and righties. He's got high spin with both of his breaking balls. Both the slider and the curveball have a chance to be above average pitches. And he's also a tremendous athlete who repeats his delivery, throws strikes at a high quality clip. And by the way, if he wasn't a pitcher, he'd be a pretty good shortstop prospect and hitting prospect in his own right. But I think teams are going to be super enamored with his upside on the mound. For me, he is in the Hunter Green, Mackenzie Gore, Jackson Jobe sort of elite high school pitching grouping. I think he very much is in play to become the first ever high school right-handed pitcher to go first overall. And again, just the upside is tremendous with him.
You mentioned there's the thing about a high school pitcher at the top of the draft. You can talk about draft demographics and all a lot. And here's the challenge that Seth faces. But at the same time, I feel like in 2025, we are at the point where to be even in consideration as a top 10 pick, as a high school pitcher, righty or lefty, but especially right-hander, it kind of means that you had to kind of almost surmount an obstacle course to get there. And so when you mentioned Hunter Green, we can talk about Hunter Green. We can talk about Jackson Jobe. There just aren't that many of these guys anymore. You could, I guess, if you want to say lefties as well, you could talk about Mackenzie Gore. The hit rate on them hasn't been that bad lately, I would say. But partly that's because there are so few targets here. There are so few people to even look at that. Carlos, do you feel like that there is some part of this where it's like, now, if you're a first round talent as a high school pitcher, that kind of puts you in that 15 to 30 range most of the time, that you have to be truly special to really even be considered, especially as a top 10 pick?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of like where these high school pitchers are being drafted, you tend to see them going more in that range just because, like you mentioned, it's a really high bar to clear as a high school pitcher. If teams are tackling pitching in the first round, if there's a comparable college talent, there's just a lot less risk in the college profile. You're going to get a return on investment a lot sooner. And so those are some of the reasons why those profiles tend to go a little bit further. So you have to clear, you get really nitpicked if you're a high school pitcher being talked about at the very top of the draft. And I think Seth clears all of those hurdles. I mean, again, the only weaknesses in his profile is that he is a high school right-handed pitcher. Not a lot he can do about that. And I think there are some critiques about, like, is the shape of the fastball an ideal shape at this point? Is that going to be something that he needs to clean up or refine a little bit in pro ball? Those are very granular nitpicks at the end of the day. And I do think if you look back at some of these muddled draft classes, and I would say the 2025 class is fairly muddled, there's no clear cut, obvious number one candidate. Guys like Jackson Jobe, guys like Hunter Green look pretty good in hindsight in groups of college arms around them that just haven't panned out to the level that the high school pitchers did in those classes. So I think if you really believe in the talent, you have a willingness and a patience to wait for the ETA to arrive. Again, I just think he has some of the most exciting upside in the class, real front of the rotation upside.
If we're comparing him to the college pitchers at the top of this class, the thing that does kind of jump out to me is obviously there is a certain level of the college pitchers have done it for more years, and that's something that does kind of reduce your risk a little bit. But if you're the thing with Seth Hernandez, and the thing with kind of I would say that it's almost like the thing that you can bring up with a Jackson Jobe, a Seth Hernandez, or a Hunter Green. Seth Hernandez, you're not really projecting on him physically, are you, Carlos? It's something where he has to continue to add polish. That's something that every pitcher needs to do, amateur pitcher, college or high school. But if you said Seth Hernandez isn't going to get physically stronger than he is today, he's not going to throw harder than he is today, that's okay, which a lot of times is not the case when we're talking about a high school pitcher. When I compare him even physically to the top pitchers on the college side, he's really more physical than a number of these top pitchers on the college side, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And I also think he throws as hard or harder right now than a lot of the college guys. So to your point, you don't need to project a lot in terms of stuff coming or body coming. I mean, you watched him at USA Baseball's NHSI when he threw a complete 7 inning game. He touched 93 one time. Other than that, it was 94 plus, and he was hitting 99 miles per hour in the last inning. So I don't think you need to say, hey, like he's topping this velocity, he needs to hold it more. I think he already does that well. What separates Seth and is the reason that he's in the mix here compared to some of these college guys is he really just does check every box. He's got secondaries. He's got a power fastball that leads his arsenal. He's got an out pitch with a changeup. He has high spin rates. He's got a delivery that looks like a starter. Not all the college pitchers at the top of the board this year can claim all of those. And so what you sacrifice when you're a high school pitcher is just there's more risk to your profile. So our team's going to be willing to take on the risk to get the upside that Seth Hernandez is giving you. That's really the question for me.
Where do you think when we look at a pitcher like this, the one other thing you hit on is the difference between the college pitchers and the high school pitchers is how long. Okay, so if my team takes Seth Hernandez, what is realistically an expectation of when I hope to see him on that big league mound?
I think the ETA is somewhere between 3 and 6 years. The quickest elite high school pitchers will make the major leagues within 3 years. That's fairly quick, and I think it takes a couple years after reaching the major leagues before you kind of figure out the tweaks you need to make and really step into the middle or front of the rotation starter role that you have projected. Guys like Mackenzie Gore and Hunter Green, they both made the majors 3 or 4 years after they were drafted. Maybe a year later for the COVID year with them, but then 6 to 7 years after their draft year is really where you're starting to see them step into front of the rotation pitchers that we expected them to be coming out of the draft. So in terms of from draft to anchoring a rotation, I think 6 to 7 years is a pretty typical estimate, at least for some of the better pitchers we've seen in recent years. And again, comparing that to the college player, it could be a year after the draft.
That's kind of the balance we face here. Like even with someone like Jackson Jobe, right? Jackson Jobe moved quickly. Unfortunately, now he also is going to need Tommy John surgery. But at the same time, if you think of him on that 7-year timetable, he's probably going to be right on pace to do that, even post injury. But the challenge with this is that if I'm drafting especially a high school pitcher, I have to have a little bit more patience. And I think that's probably worth emphasizing here, Carlos, that where we have Seth Hernandez ranked is where we have him on talent. We do think that there's a chance that he may end up being someone who, waits a little longer to hear his name called, partly for what we're talking about here, because if you're a GM, there is an advantage in some ways of saying, I'm going to take this college guy and I'm going to get, if not instant, I'm going to get pretty immediate gratification from that. You're going to have to wait a little longer on the high school guys.
Yeah, and that's the same case for fans. I mean, obviously they want the best player to be picked, but some fans are like, I don't care about 6, 7 years from now. I'm worried about, even if you're on a fan of a bad team, the next 2, 3, 4 years. So it can be tough to swallow. The patience is important though. But anyway, he is obviously highly, highly touted by Baseball America. So we'll keep an eye out on Seth Hernandez. Thanks for checking out this prospect profile. We have more of them. If you want to check them out, go to the Baseball America YouTube channel.